Hello everybody, welcome to our video webcast on implementing and planning a new Turkish simulation game. My name is Alina Thieme and I'm Program Manager for the MA program European and International Affairs at the Turkish-German University. We also at the Center for Turkey and European Union Studies have a project called Protoys.
Let me shortly introduce to you how the project evolved over time and in fact who is participating and what it is all about. So it has been implemented by Professor Wessels, the director of CTOYS, and Professor Hobe, who is a Jean Monnet Chair for European Law. Both professors found at the time that simulation games haven't been a topic at all. In fact, you have to imagine in the last 20 years, simulation games have been really developing in all kinds of different levels. So we find it now at university, at schools, but also even in professional life. So there has been some evolvement, and at this time the professors thought that it would be really interesting to interconnect two disciplines already. So it has been law and political science, because of course if you look at the real world, we see that disciplines are always connected. So it's not only that people from different disciplines work together, but also that it is all important, because in the end you cannot separate it. You have, if you talk about the European Council, you have always to know what it's, for example, in the treaty. So they have been thinking that it would be interesting to challenge the students in a different way than in normal university structures, and bring them together in order to simulate either the European Council or the European Court of Justice.
This sounds very interesting. Thank you very much for this broad overview on the project. But what about the structure of the project? How do you implement, and what are the different phases maybe over the semester?
Yeah, of course. We have here to make a difference, of course, between what are the phases for us as organizing team, so for my colleague from the law department and myself, and what is important for the students. So let me start with our part, because of course when you think about a simulation game, you might think, what is the intention of your seminar? So what is the topic you want to talk about? So this is something which starts already quite early. So usually we start already in December with the planning and thinking about the project description. So what do we want to offer next semester? And since it's international, it's also necessary to start really early with and the application process. So in the last years, we provided already in January our partner universities with the call for application. So they had the chance to inform the students on the project. And so in the end, we had a possibility to select between at least 20 and max 30 students for the project. And after this selection process, we had, of course, also the difficulty to go through the team formation, which is quite a challenging experience, because you don't know the students. You have to think about which kind of strengths and weaknesses there might come with each team. So in general, what we did is that we thought it would be helpful to have international teams, so we would not have only German teams or only Turkish teams. Exactly, and we have it always interdisciplinary, which is of course necessary, because in the end you have, of course, a different level of knowledge. If you have, for example, a European Council simulation game, it might be easier for the political science students to have the idea how to behave, and they know, they might better know the role of the actors and so on. So this is a process which is very important, so that you have in the end kind of equal teams. And then we have of course from the organizing team, we have what you have also like for usual seminars, so you provide students in advance with literature. And we design also, like from the organizing perspective, an e-learning course. So this is also something so that all students can access to the course. We don't do only like a simulation on this, the European Court of Justice or the European Council, but in fact we start already with a 3-day summer school in Brussels, so that students get to know each other. And the summer school and simulation game is carried out in June, in fact, in Brussels. So this is where all students will meet. And in order to prepare them in advance, they start in April with an introductory lecture. We have recorded in the last years the introductory lecture and then made the video available for all students online. And also the rest is, like I said before, accessible via the e-learning course or via email, of course, old-fashioned way. We also provide some information. In May, the teams prepare the papers or pleadings, depending on the simulation exercise. And of course, we accompany them during this phase. So we give them comments, we help them in a way how to prepare for the exercise, and we give some useful advice on teamwork and so on. But this phase is of course very important for the students because they interact for the first time, and they need usually some support to get started. So of course what is also important is that they get information on when to hand in which paper. So when we meet in Brussels, this is of course really exciting for most of them because they only met online usually. So it is most of the time a really exciting moment for them to really meet each other and to get in touch and to have a coffee. So we provide usually like a nice introduction where they can really get to know each other. And during the first 3 days, we have also some working groups in order to get them to work together to be in touch and to work to have like final words on the pleadings or to discuss negotiation strategies for the simulation. And of course, which is one of the most interesting aspects of the negotiation in the end in the simulation. Because you really have to prepare good arguments beforehand. You have to convince them. You have to present. So you're standing there in a like public way,
audience,
and then you have to hold a speech, or you have to present a pleading before the judges, who might come up then with questions like really tough questions on why did you structure an argument like this. So.
How were your experiences on this, on the communication between the students during the preparation process, so to say?
I think this is something really important because communication is still something difficult in this context. Even more than in usual terms, because communication, we can observe, in fact, different levels here. So first is, of course, the international communication. So they have to change language. There's hardly one student who's a native English speaker. So all have to communicate in English, and for some it's easier, of course, and for some it's still something new to do it this way, and to get a feeling for the other persons, and you don't meet in person, so there are two different levels also that you really have to approach someone from a different perspective. And then it's also that they come from different disciplines. So you have to imagine you don't only come from a different background in cultural terms and in language terms, but also that you might not even understand everything what the other one is saying, but because of course someone coming from law has a different perspective on the development of, for example, or how to write a paper than someone coming from political science. And then overall, then they come from different academic traditions. So when you come from France, you tend to have a different way to I don't know, to do research or to think what are the important things to put, for example, also in a paper. And then someone coming from Turkey. And another part of how to describe the concept is that it is active learning. Active learning is something which is the basis of a simulation exercise, because you are not only a passive student who is sitting there in the classroom absorbing a lot of knowledge and if possible you might discuss it, but this is basically the involvement of a student in the classroom.
Sure.
And here you have it really in a different way. Students can steer themselves how to, what focus they want to, take, which policy parts they find really interesting. And of course it's coming from their role, but they have to actively learn this themselves and then to implement it during the negotiations, for example. And this is really different form of learning, and they have to apply the knowledge actively, which they before gathered in a different way of research.
And you also talked about learning objectives very briefly. So maybe we could elaborate a little bit more on this. So what are the learning objectives of a simulation game?
Yeah, I would like to do that in a twofold approach, because at the one hand we can see that we have a general academic idea of what do we always want to generate knowledge. So what it is actually what they learn. And then on the other hand we have, and this is a really great difference also to standard seminars, we have a lot of professional skills. So let me start with the more academic part, or the academic skills they learn. So the first one is that they generate a substantial knowledge of a certain policy field. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we had a European Council simulation game on the refugee crisis and the involvement of Turkey in the resolution of the crisis. So here, of course, students had to gain in-depth knowledge about what is actually the refugee crisis about. Here we learned, for example, in Brussels that the term was quite different. They spoke about the refugee management crisis. So just to give you an idea how different the approach is, and you might not even see it from literature or from what you read basically in the newspaper. And so they gain a really different understanding for a certain policy field. So this is point number one. Then point number two is about the possibility to experience a dynamic political process. So of course you read how negotiations work, or that the European Council has certain tasks, and this is something you learn at a seminar basically. But when you are in a simulation exercise, what is really different is that you experience it. So
yourself,
you are at the moment the president of the European Council, or you work for the Commission in a way. So it's really different, not only to read about it, but to do it in the moment. And point number three is understanding institutional dynamics. So in the end, of course, you have to gather knowledge about how the different institutions work together and what they do, and how, for example, also rules have an effect on each institutions. And there's a really big difference between reading about it and experiencing it. They get a different understanding of how institutions work together, which different actors are involved, and so on. So what I see from the past is that it is really a lasting knowledge transfer. So students might not remember every seminar in detail they did at university, but most tell me when I see them later, well, simulation exercise, I remember like who we talked to and which policy we talked about and what did, I don't know, France say to England at this moment and so on. So it's really interesting how different knowledge is generated at the moment. and it's really different than in a usual classroom situation.
But how the simulation exercise is used to reach all these learning objectives?
This is something which is of course important, and I might have mentioned it already in a limited way, but here I also can make 3 basic points. First is that students they prepare for the simulation by discovering their role.
Okay.
So they really get into their role as, for example, a member state or an institution, and it's going beyond really usual research. They get into the feeling about the history, for example, of a member state, and they see which kind of governments did lead the country, and how this, for example, which impact this had on the decisions of the country within the European Council. So this is something which is really interesting to see how they generate knowledge at a first step. And the second one is that they research, of course, the policy field in depth. So they get an idea of what is the policy field in general, so which competences has the EU in the policy field, who are the decisive actors, and what are the challenges within the policy field, what are the problems between institutions, member states, between member states, can they see perhaps in the beginning or before the simulation starts, they figure out which coalitions would be fruitful in the end. So, of course, you would anticipate that you go to someone who has probably more or less the same position as you have in a negotiation. So here they learn a lot about policy fields and the background. And the third point is that they can discuss these findings with practitioners in Brussels. So they have a really comprehensive overview over the policy fields, and generating knowledge is thus really different than when you do it in a regular classroom situation. And this is what I meant with active learning beforehand. They do it a lot by themselves, and so they develop a lot of ideas on their own. And I think this is all important in order to see how in the end this is really this lasting knowledge transfer which is taking place. What is also important is that they gain a lot of professional skills in the moment.
Yeah, I imagine.
So when we have mentioned before the teamwork, it is of course something you hardly have the possibility to work in such a complex teamwork situation during your studies than in this one. Interdisciplinary, international, in a foreign language. You meet online and you meet then in Brussels, and you have to work really as a team in order to succeed. So this is one. And the second one is, of course, in a situation you have to take over a specific role. And this is something, of course, you do later in your business life every day. You have a specific role. You have, for example, you work with someone like in the lobby, and then you have to perform here also a certain role. You have to adapt certain knowledge on a topic and then present it and convince someone. So this is something you really gain as experience when you have been taking part in a simulation exercise. And of course also you are in direct touch with practitioners. So students may beforehand do different like traineeships, so they have perhaps once in a while the possibility to get in touch. But here we have people who are like working in the commission, so they can really get in touch with someone who is a decision maker in the end. And I think for a lot of them, this is also the first time they get in touch with someone who makes a difference.
So thank you very, very much. That was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you as well.
I think we gained a lot of very fruitful insights on how to plan and implement a simulation game with international students in Brussels. So there are a lot of challenges and also chances for the students actually to get to improve their academic skills and especially their professional skills. So thank you very much for listening and watching.